Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, April 22nd instance of SIG Docs. We do not have any agenda items for today, but we can start up with an open discussion and take it from there. That being said, are there specific areas that people wanted to discuss as we start off?
I'll give a quick update on the Bike Alliance site, and we can see if there are any other items we want to discuss there. Um, the review process seems to be complete for adding the projects page in its initial iteration. So the last thing for that is to merge. I uh, got sort of approval to merge it, but don't have merge powers. So asked David about that, and I think that'll probably happen pretty shortly. So once we have that, we can start to build on it and create a fancier representation of the project. We can kind of manipulate the data that we have there in the data file on the site in whatever way we need. So yeah, are there any other kind of initiatives we want to have top of mind for the BA site? I know Timo's done the work on making it a little easier to work with, and bringing some of the dependencies up to date and just kind of doing a cleanup around the repo. Took a look at some of his changes, and they looked great, and I think it'll be very beneficial. So when he gets a PR up on those, hopefully we can move that along pretty quickly. Um, any other items we want to discuss for the site?
I think back when we were talking about it a bit, one of the areas we wanted to improve for the site was making it more accessible to add a blog, if I'm remembering correctly. Is that something we want to circle back to?
So for um, Bike Alliance members and contributors to add a blog in general, I think the work that Timo's done to make it just easier to pull down and run locally and develop with is definitely a important first step on that. What kinds of additional kind of enhancements do we imagine?
Sorry, do you mind if I jump in here and ask for just a little bit of context? Um, where were these changes being made? Was there a link to the PR would be awesome. Sorry, I
Yeah,
think this is
so
the first time I've heard.
there isn't a PR yet,
Oh, okay.
but on his personal repo, I can dig it up and throw it in the chat in a minute or two.
Oh, and the stuff that you were working on that you mentioned earlier as well. You said you couldn't merge it, but I actually wasn't sure which PR we were talking about there.
Yeah, let me throw both those into the chat. So here's mine. It'll take me a minute to dig up Timo's repo.
Oh, nice. Thanks. So the basic idea that once Timo's changes are in, then it'll be easier to for anyone to just sort of add a blog to the site. Is that basically it? Like
So
the
his
basic
changes will
layout.
make it so that you can pull down the repo locally and not hit some errors when you're trying to run Jekyll, which currently happens for pretty much anyone who tries to work with it. So that's just a layer of friction that he's helping to move past. And I think now sort of an object for discussion is how might we want to facilitate easier contribution of blogs? What additional changes might we want to make? And I think that's an open question.
Okay, awesome. So basically, his change would almost need to get merged first before it's reasonable for anyone to even do anything. Okay.
Eric, would you be willing to reach out to Timo to just give him a bump to PR in what he has?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the other thing for blogs that would be great is if a process was documented. So if we, if someone wants to write a blog, does that mean creating an issue to describe their blog and then PR, or could they just PR in their blog and then that's reviewed or not reviewed? So just kind of documenting a way to add a blog to the site.
Yeah, would we want that to be blog specific, or a more general contribution guide?
General contribution guide would be great if there isn't one at all. Yeah.
Because an improved one is part of Timo's update, so we'll be a step towards that.
Sounds like just adding then a section to that about blogs would be great.
Just a quick check. Is anyone taking notes?
I am. I can do it in a Google Doc if that's easier, but I'm doing it in the meetings
No.
repo
It's all
and I'll
good.
push it up.
Yeah, as long as it's anyone, it's fine.
All right, so I can take on an expansion of the contribution guide once Timo's update goes up, to add some blog specific bits. That should be easy.
Since I'm taking notes, does someone want to drive the agenda while I do that? I know there isn't an agenda, but just move us forward while I catch up on notes.
Do we just want to go through the issues or what?
Yeah. If no one else has anything else, right? I think Eric just brought up something he wanted to discuss, but does anyone else have anything else they want to discuss?
I'll just give an update that I still haven't heard back from Bailey on hosting the artifacts for the component book repo. I'm gonna give her another bump today. And then I'll also bump maybe some of the other, maybe ask Yosh, since I know he got some examples up, what his path was like for that if I don't hear back from Bailey. But yeah, I'll keep looking at that on getting those hosted.
Are you talking about the GHCR stuff or you're talking about different artifacts?
I'm talking about the GHCR components for adder and calculator and all those.
Yeah, cool.
Oh, I also have the PR and component docs. Kate, I'm sure you've been probably tied up, but hopefully I've addressed most of your concerns there. I think we had a bit of a discussion about sort of Git and wording and everything, and hopefully I didn't discourage anyone, because I know I think there's been a lot of sort of back and forth there, but I totally agree. Especially with the stuff moving to GHCR, I ripped out most of the pieces that would be considered an innovation.
Sounds good. Yeah, I know. We kind of took a break from the PR for a bit, but I'll take a look at that again today, and hopefully we should just be able to get it in.
I opened one issue because somebody else opened an issue. I guess it's like the most recent one, and they closed theirs out after I provided an explanation to them. But basically, they like attempted to do some imports by adding a include in their WIT, which like then obliged them to like export like WASI HTTP. And so I kind of explained to them that, hey, if you do an include, then you'll have to export everything that the thing you're including exports. and that helped them realize the thing. So I was kind of like, and that feels like a not Rust specific thing, like that would be the case regardless of the language you're doing. So I figured it probably belongs somewhere in the book that like I know that I think we already kind of explained what include means in wit somewhere, but like from the actual like practically from the point of view of like, hey, I'm authoring a component, I'm including something and I don't realize what it means, what I'm signing up for when I add an include statement in my wit. So I don't know if anybody like has ideas about where in the book would be best for that, or also whether or not the idea that I'm expressing is clear. But yeah, I'm happy to clarify it or yeah, but I don't know if I think I'm mostly curious if anybody has opinions about like where it would be best put, because we kind of like have the how to author a component in like each of the different language sections. And so I don't really know if there's like a good place that is like, here are practical pieces of information if you're authoring a component, regardless of the language that you're like doing it in. But yeah.
I would say the most generic section is the creating and consuming components section, which is language agnostic. So authoring, composing, running, distributing, and fetching. So maybe there you could add to honestly, the authoring component section. I think it would make sense off the top of my head of where it would fit the best.
Yeah.
Would it be handy to
there's-
think of a glossary for these terms? Like just lumping all of the keywords like export, include together?
Those to me are wit words, right?
Yeah,
So they could be in the wit section.
Okay.
yeah, and also there's the including other worlds. There's also a section in the wit design on the wit design page, which we probably should put a note there, just that it'll well, so it already says that it'll cause the world to export all that world's exports and import all the words imports. I don't know that the average person will just understand that or understand the implications of that. But we do have that section as well for as far as places that include is used.
Yeah, I think I'm almost like looking for it. It almost feels like the wit grammar is kind of like tackled separately than like what it means to you as an author of a component, you know? And so I think that I'm trying to figure out like if there was a way to provide like a bridge between the sections where people like, I feel like you kind of look at the wit section if you're just like, hey, I'm trying to like understand what wit is, you know, but it's like less like about the like practical usage of it, you know? And so, yeah, I think actually it would be, I'm thinking that maybe I'll like play around with writing up a little something that could partway be in authoring components and also partway be in wit, and maybe they can like cross-reference each other. I think that could make sense. And then
That'd be great.
yeah, I also think that this, once we get the GHCR stuff up, this could be like improved with like just having examples of like, this is another component that I like want to interact with. And so like we can differentiate between an import and an include, like, you know, and like maybe show an example of like when you would want it to be include rather than an import, you know, because I think basically the person who ran into the issue, I think was able to achieve what they wanted. I forget if they ended up using an import or a use, but like, yeah.
Yeah, that was actually I feel like another good question. If that issue they created is still around, if you could ask them how they got there, like it would be really great to know their path through the document. Like, how did they know they should put include? And
Yeah, they closed the issue, but I linked to it in my issue.
Okay, sick.
Yeah. And I asked them like, what are you trying to do? I kind of like gave them an initial like, this is probably what's going on. This is probably what you want instead, but also like curious what the thing was that you were trying to do. And I think the whole thing is that they just like wanted WASI HTTP types, right? And so then they like included WASI HTTP, and which they don't need, like if they don't want to be a WASI HTTP thing, but just want access to WASI HTTP. So yeah, the issue's linked. I think it should be clear-ish. I don't know if they provided like exactly how the book made them think that that's what they should do, other than like it's easy to realize that include is a keyword, and like it kind of sounds like it does what they expected it to do, right? Like, so yeah. But yeah, also I guess like I think even without like GHCR2, I'm also just noticing right now at this moment, like they provided, so I'll share the link to their original issue. Maybe we could open another issue for this too, which is like they are referencing like local file paths in their dependencies, which like they shouldn't need to if they're using cargo component and which has WASM package tools in it. Then they should be able to just like configure WASM package tools so it fetches things from GHCR, and all of the dependencies that they're describing should be in GHCR already. So like it could make sense to maybe I'll open an issue that is like replace file path local depths in Rust examples if people are on board with that. But yeah.
Yeah, please definitely do that. I didn't realize we had that, or I didn't realize that was the case in the Rust example.
Yeah, and it was a pretty common practice, or like I think it's still a pretty common practice for yeah. I think they're definitely in the past it was pretty common practice to add dependencies in your like cargo toml to like various WIT packages. And then when we got registry support initially with Warg, but then also with OCI, it was like, oh, you can, if the thing is in a registry, you can just like use the package name. And then I think just like things didn't get updated because it also works the way that it is here if you have the same file like directory structure. So anyways, yes, I will make an issue that is like, use GHCR for WASI dependencies in TOML files.
This is another thing where I'm kind of curious how they found which set of instructions they went to / visit before they decided to do that. Because
my guess actually
yeah
is I'm just gonna, if you check out hello WASI HTTP, my guess
okay
that there, so maybe hello WASI, yeah, so hello WASI HTTP does that.
Mm-hmm. Dan Gilman's thing.
Yep, because that predates
the
registry support.
example.
So I don't know if it makes sense to update that thing. I mean, we could update it there.
Yeah, I think your recommendation is good. I wonder if this even makes sense as a maybe not, but like a warning in cargo component. But maybe that's too much.
No, I think that's actually like, I think it's like good. I think that this is actually like a pretty interesting, and if other people are on board to think about it, like I almost feel like referencing like having file paths into a deps folder almost like makes people think that like these are editable, and they are editable, or like I guess like this is similar to like editing your node modules and like doing like an npm link kind of a thing, or like having like a file path for like a crate, like as a dependency. And like I think it could make sense to have a section in the book that is like if I'm just like ideating or like thinking about what should even like belong in the issue in like the component docs book. Like I don't think we should document that it's possible to specify your dependencies via a file path, right? Like if you want to tinker, like there's probably a workflow where it makes sense for you to explicitly use a file path. But I think that it's simpler to use a registry. So it should be like, you probably want to use a registry. And then if you're like doing something advanced, you do have like the file path way available to you. So we should like probably document both of those things. Yeah, Kate, that makes sense. I So yeah, I'll think about the wording a little bit before I open up an issue, but I'll open up an issue, and this could, I guess, potentially be a little contagious and make its way into cargo component and or like WASI HTTP if we decided we wanted it to. Maybe I'll like message Dan and ask him his thoughts and feelings about like updating the Hello WASI HTTP to just like make it so that there are fewer examples of people copying and pasting the like more complicated thing. But yeah, because I've actually seen other people too like get pretty tripped up on the file path stuff because you have to have like your folder structured set up properly. Like I've seen it multiple times. So yeah.
Any other topics before we jump into issue triage? Awesome. Does anyone want to lead issue triage?
Do we just start from like oldest or?
We have a project board that you can
Oh, I see that.
Oh,
pull new issues into.
oh, and one thing, Kate. I realize I can't actually approve PRs or close anything.
Yeah, we have to add you as a maintainer still. Yeah, we should put up an issue to do a process for that. Or just a PR. I'll put that on me. Ivan's out, so it might be another week if we want to get multiple maintainers to approve the merge.
Yeah, no worries.
Um, yeah, so we have a project board. I guess. Do we feel like we need notes while we're issue triaging? Or
Yeah,
I
I think
can.
we could leave those in the issues.
Okay.
Right. So there should be some.
I'm just finishing out a little bit of the notes. All right, I can share my screen and show how to do it this time, and then next time we can switch it up. But I just went to the component doc site and then the project, so I guess I'll walk through that a little. Went to the projects, and then we have one project board, and then we can pull in new items. Right now, there's plenty of items that haven't been brought in yet. So, yeah, and just pull in a bunch of new ones that we haven't triaged. Some of these are old, like we want to do all of these, but
I think some of them have already been solved too.
um, is that a reason to not add them, or is that a reason to add them to verify?
No.
Go for it.
It's a positive.
All right. Oh, there's even more than that. We'll start with that many. Okay. So, our categories are to do, in progress, and done. And then this March 27th milestone, we have, maybe we start with this because we did update a lot of these. I know the C# docs were updated, but I can't remember if we added registry support yet in those updates. Um, Doesn't look like it added new content, so I'll leave that. That's still a to-do. I'm gonna move these into to-do since that, or maybe this milestone's actually good to keep alive. Okay, so we still need someone to add a registry section to the C# guide. Refreshing the Go language guide. I believe we did that. Maybe. I know Joe was gonna look at it. Okay, looks like we didn't. I'll just tag Joe on this and say,
Yeah, I was gonna say there will also be some changes upstream, I think. So there was an issue with WASM tools, a certain version of WASM tools. So which is why there's a warning in the Go section right now. So that probably also needs to be updated as well. It looks like he wants to add an example of using resources. So it seems like this issue is multiple things. But at the very least, also the WASM tools version can be updated. I mean, I think Joe will know when he looks at this, but you know, just call.
all right. Registry section to rest guide. We're still waiting for our hosted examples. So I think not, even though, do we have that now? I think that's still open. Refreshing rest language guide. I think we can close this with your PR. Mikhail, what do you think? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Refresh JavaScript guide. That's still needed. Anyone know someone who is plugged into the JavaScript ecosystem who'd want to look at this?
Yeah, I can work on that. I maintain Jco right now.
Thank you.
Should probably do a pass of just like inlining the examples with like the include statement as well for the other languages. That would be a horizontal pass through, which would probably reduce the burden of work of sort of the Python, Go, and JavaScript stuff as well. So this is specifically, I'm talking about the MD book include statement that sort of grabs a file and like puts it into the documentation itself, which I think Victor was equally excited as I was to have.
Yeah, I'll do that as part of refreshing the JavaScript guide. We can do
Okay.
it for multiple languages, but I feel like it's a thing we can do it at any point. Maybe it's just worth noting in some of the sort of the issues, so that whoever ends up working on whatever language guide, like, hey, please consider using.
Victor, when you do that, can you do that include statement as a single commit within that PR, and then we can open an issue and point to that commit as reference, and that'll be easy for like a new contributor even to pick up.
In fact, I can actually just do it as a separate PR, and just have one, because I think it'll be really, really small as well. So
Great. So the Python guide, we did check in with Joel and he said it's good, but that on the horizon, there's going to be some DevX improvements with native extensions. So it seems like this issue may want to evolve to this request. I think we can just close this, probably.
Yeah, I'm for that. I think like having slightly more specific just issues going forward might be also good. Just so they're a little easier for people to just walk up and take. And
Sounds good. Okay, so it sounds like we still Ottawa, the HTTP example hasn't been done yet. But basically this can reference out to some of the examples that already exist. So whether that's Dan's or Yosh's, that basically like explaining that you can use Wasm time serve is the idea here.
question: what do you think about rolling that up into that other issue that we have for the I think it was a template repo or the examples repo, like that was sort of per language and split out?
Well, I think this is the exact example of that, is that Yosh is working on that. So we created a WASI HTTP example in Rust that's in the Bytecode Alliance. And like it's under Bytecode Alliance. And so I think he was going to create one for every other language. So I think it basically satisfies that requirement, and could be used as an example for that scenario.
Okay, so then the work inside that issue would be maybe to create a page or something in the docs that just points out all these sort of advanced examples or links to them.
Yeah, and I think with this one, we can even do a preview of it. So like literally just this line, Whackage OCI pull the hosted example in the Wasm time serve it. Just to say like Wasm time serves the thing. I don't know. I want to include that somewhere. But yeah, to your point, maybe it needs to be somewhere else.
I mean, yeah, I think that makes sense too. I mean, if it's as easy as those two lines, that's great. I think for something to put on the listing page. Where I was thinking of was like maybe we can put in this issue like to close this out, like sort of what is it? I can forget the word for it, but the like sort of completion requirements, or like basically to sort of close up this issue, you need to add, let's say, a section to component docs with sort of, I don't know if it's like advanced examples or something. We need to find a place for these examples to live, and then two, include in that a way to get started with them, like a sort of preview or something to sort of, I guess, welcome people to or onboard people a little bit, if it can be done, without explaining all the code. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that looks.
that makes sense. And then looking at where it could go under, we could have a tutorials and make this plural and have this page be a top level page that points to tutorials, and a sub page be the calculator one that's our walkthrough. And then otherwise it can point out to other repos.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think the calculator is like a kind of tutorial, and but do you see Yosh's repo as like a tutorial or an example? Because like if there's more documentation in there, then we can consider it a tutorial. Because
Mm.
I guess you could say there's not like a ton to sort of like explain in there, but I haven't looked at his repo a ton.
Yeah, I think it's an example more than a tutorial, probably. So maybe we have should we add a new examples section?
Oh yeah, that would work too. Yeah, that would work. Examples, yeah. Because the calculator, we actually basically walk through every single step, right, and try and like really guide people through how to use it. Yeah, a new section would probably be awesome.
Yeah, because the tricky thing is this could be something that we just reference in the Rust guide, but we want a way to talk about WASI HTTP, like, or talk about WASM time serve.
And I think that's a really common use case, right? Like if anyone wants to do anything serverless, they're going to want that. I think that page
Right.
will be pointed to a lot as well.
Well, that's why it's almost like, should we instead make this a tutorial and do it ourselves because we want to have a JavaScript, Python, um, and C# examples? Like, should we be doing that instead?
Yes, with more time and energy. I think like this is a
Right.
good stopgap. And then when we actually have a full tutorial that goes through HTTP and like all the concepts and sort of puts them together, kind of like we do with calculator, then we can have our own sort of link to a proper broken out tutorial rather than just an example, if that makes sense. Like this might be a good like in between step.
For more in betweening, does it make sense to highlight that like with cargo component new, you can like target WASI HTTP, and then there'll be like scaffolded out, like all you need to do is implement the handle function that is already like there for you, and like then you have an HTTP server. So like at least like for Rust, there's more than just like this is an example of code that works, but like actually like a little bit of like you can also DIY it. I don't know.
It sounds like we, no matter what, should document that in the Rust guide. So Rust just gets extra support for things, maybe. Um,
I agree with that. It, it it feels like that would be hard to put in like next to adder code, if that makes sense, right? Like the complexity just skyrocket. Well, not skyrockets, but just like it's like a step change. If this new examples page exists, what would you think about like at the bottom being like starting from scratch and then sort of having this kind of because unfortunately it doesn't fit great. It doesn't fit great with next to adder code. It doesn't fit great in this example because this example is already pre-built. It's kind of like if you are starting a new HDB project, here's how you would do it. That's the information, right? So
I
I
think
do
the
wonder where.
first one of it not going with the adder code, I don't fully get that one. I was imagining we'd have multiple tutorials. So we'd have a tutorial section and then it'd be like composing components tutorial, WASI HTTP echo server tutorial, and you would click in and it would be a different tutorial. Um, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I agree with that. I was thinking of a world where we don't have the split out tutorial sections yet. So like right now we only have one tutorial per se. Like the idea was split them out, then we can have separate tutorials. I thought I was thinking that the HTTP example being under like examples is like the time before we have a proper tutorial HTTP tutorial. If we have a proper HTTP tutorial, then we just start with cargo component with HTTP. That makes a ton of sense. But I'm thinking of like if we don't jump straight to that, because I think that's a bunch of work, then add in an examples section, linking out, and then maybe again, this is like the sort of messiest part, is like adding if you were doing this from scratch, here's how you could start. But maybe that could be added to. Maybe Dan would be happy to add that upstream instead as well. So there are multiple ways to go on that, but feels like easiest first step is add an example section, link out to the HTTP example, and then plus minus instructions on how you could start it from scratch.
So does the takeaway seem to be that what makes sense is to have two different action items, one of which is like have an example section link to, I'm kind of just repeating you, but yeah, have an example section that references hello WASI HTTP. Also add a second tutorial set which is an independent like action item, and that would be like an example of somebody implementing their own version of something like a Hello WASI HTTP.
I just worry about if what else do we imagine living in this example section? Like if we're going to create an entire section, just understanding what the scope of it is. Other knit is I think we should reference Yosh's, um not Dan's, because Yosh's is the Bytecode Alliance project.
I think
So this one, not Hello Wazzy HTTP.
sample WASI HTTP. Hey, can I, sorry, on a quick detour, does the cargo toml there use the file paths that we were talking about before? It doesn't.
Yeah, when I think about what other examples could be there, I think honestly, I think HTTP is one of the bigger ones, and just having that in multiple languages. And I agree with that point that what else would we put in examples, right? If we're gonna have the section be there forever, ideally, HTTP tutorial is what we want, right? Like that's the best thing, I think, is just splitting out tutorials. So we have the calculator tutorial that sort of finishes up and uses the adder stuff, and then the HTTP tutorial. But writing the HTTP tutorial sounds like a lot of work, or more work than sort of linking out to the example. If we want to, I'm also fine with just saying that, hey, we'll just wait till there's an HTTP tutorial and we'll use that as breaking it out too, though. But I look at the examples as like a way to add repos that look at this repo as an example of blank. But right now, when I think of the examples that most people care about, I think HTTP is probably one of them. Yeah.
I kind of got excited by the prospect of there being an examples folder. And the reason why is because I still think that it's difficult to articulate like all of the ways in which people can hit obstacles when trying to import functionality from one component into another, and that it almost could serve as a place where you have sources for examples.
Yeah, like troubleshooting or whatnot. I think just like a happy path, a vertical slice happy path for all this stuff would be great, because that's also something you could potentially run in CI, so that any snags you hit upon can be picked up.
But I don't know if I Kate, I feel like you had some concerns about adding an examples directory, and so I don't want to, or I want to make sure that I understand them. If but yeah, I think it could serve. I think if we wanted to, we could use the example section as a place to be look, you could have this component and this component, and these are the things that you should be able to get to compose when you try to follow along in the tutorial, or we could also have an example of if we tried to have that section that differentiates between the import keyword and the include keyword when you're actually authoring things, we could be this is the story that would result in you wanting to use the include keyword instead, right? And so I just feel like it could be a place where we could point to things where it makes sense to leverage various features that exist in tool chains. But yeah, and it also doesn't have to be. I could just see that it working out well for that.
So it sounds like examples, not just a list of links to repos with examples. Examples is a place where you can add a new section to describe some set of functionality that you feel like doesn't have a home otherwise.
Yeah, and we could groom it, we could pay attention to it. So if it gets and yeah, I could see it there being some maintenance burden with it if we let it just be where anybody throws any example of code, but yeah.
I definitely think it's going to turn into a dumping ground, but so much is undocumented that maybe a dumping ground of things being documented is better than nothing. So people want to go that way, that's, fine with me. Feel free to pull request that in, that change. Do we want it to be a top level section like reference or advanced topics and runtime support, like that level, or a single page like useful links, for example?
Yeah, what if it was just like right after tutorial? What if it was section 11?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. But do we want that?
I think
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think
that's
that
fine.
the way you phrased it might be good, Kate. Like I think it does have potential to turn into a dumping ground, which I think, while burdensome, could also be beneficial, as in it could be a place where it could make clear that people are trying to do things that they don't know how to do, right? Like, and that like these are things that people want to be documented better, which I think could be good.
Okay. All right.
Oh, could you make that a link to Yosh's thing? The
It
repo you
is
just had up. Oh, okay, awesome.
right here. It's the
Did he have the whackage command in his, or was that Dan's?
he had the whackage command.
Oh, okay, awesome. Thank you.
I'll create a new issue to create a WASI HTTP tutorial. Similar context, so.
Looks like while we've been chatting, Bailey responded saying that you have admin for the project, so you should be able to publish to GHCR in the repo, Kate.
Okay.
Do you want to set up a way to do that in an automated fashion rather than necessarily doing it manually?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we do one before the other though?
Yeah.
Can I just push it and then we add CI later?
Yeah, I
Cool.
think that makes sense.
Yeah, sounds good. And we already have an issue for like setting up package publishing, so I don't even think you need an issue for that. That's new. I think there's already an issue.
So for the WASI HTTP tutorials, we're going to maintain code for Python, C#, and JavaScript for the time being, it sounds like. Or are we going to do it like the adder tutorial where we don't publish the code, we just describe the steps?
This is a good question because that makes me think, why is only Rust have us like sort of a link out then?
Well, it's
Like
just
if
because
we're
time.
yeah.
Yosh hasn't been able to do them all yet, but
Yeah. But if we're going to write a tutorial, in the world where we do write a full tutorial, it feels like it'd be the same as the other tutorial, right? Like why wouldn't we have all the languages there?
well, the other tutorial, we don't have the code. We specifically keep it vague so that we don't have to maintain code. So we say, reference your language guide to author it. But I guess the language guide does offer specifically an adder component, so that's fair.
Yeah. We do actually like we
And we have the
don't
Rust
write.
example.
Yeah, and we don't have the like we don't we don't like host the code, or we don't make the code sort of pullable, but we basically write it out in each of the language guides, right? Like we basically write exactly what you would write to make the component and show the users, which I think is good, right? I don't think we should not do that. So, I mean, it seems like in the tutorial, for tutorials, we should probably keep that consistent and write a full guide which has basically all the code required. Um, it, I think it does also help keep us honest. Like if it's painful to write a tutorial for a simple HTTP component, it's probably painful to use WebAssembly in general, right? So like there's no like we don't have to do it in sort of the raw, like we don't have to use, you know, let's say raw 0.2 or whatever, right? We can use helpers and we can use, you know, BCA SDKs that make it easier. But if we find that it's overly difficult, that's probably a good signal that we should raise a flag somewhere in the ecosystem to make it easier for most people who would approach, right? Because I think the adder code is pretty simple. Of course, it's hard to understand how everything fits together for someone who's completely new, but the actual code is pretty simple, easy to annotate, easy to understand at a glance. If HTTP isn't that, that's probably lets us know there's another problem.
I think writing a tutorial is not my concern. What's going to be hard for me, it's going to be the maintaining it. I think we already don't do a good job of that. And so people go into the doc and they try and run our example and it breaks, and then that's their first experience. And so we haven't proven that we're good at maintaining code. And so we're going to take on maintaining 4 more code bases. I have a bit of reservations about whether that's going to cause people to have not great experiences, but we add CI, hopefully that can be fine. And um you know, ideally it is on Yasha's roadmap to upstream different, like a language example. So by adding one for JavaScript, C Sharp, C, and Python, we can one by one upstream those. The only thing is then when they're upstreamed, like who's the maintainer on each of those. But we could be helping with that project simultaneously, that WASI project. So yeah. So I guess what are the criteria for this tutorial? In order for the tutorial to be done, do we need to have all 5 languages have implementations and CI and the tutorial? Is that, or is there a way to break it up?
Yeah, let's say one, like just one tutorial to start. 'Cause I just think having one person do 5 to try and close out this tutorial and then not shipping until all 5 are done is pretty is a lot, I think, to ask of whoever picks up the ticket.
Um,
What do you think?
yeah, we're gonna have to think about this differently because for the adder tutorial, the actual implementation steps are in the language guide. So would we put the actual implementation steps for this also in the language guides?
It's almost like the organization is like wrong, because we not wrong, but like doesn't work for a second tutorial. Like the way it's set up now, the tutorial is adder plus calculator essentially. And so the language guides are adder guides, and then there's a calculator guide later. But it seems like if we want to make a second tutorial, which is an HTTP tutorial, then the language guides for that needs to be HTTP related. And then there's not really necessarily a calculator guide to be added, right? So I guess the question, I guess, is should we reorganize to support separate tutorials at that level. Which means, should we pull language guides? Because so right now, if you look at like the organization, there's language guides, then the tutorial, but the language guide is kind of part of the tutorial because you can't. Well, you can't. You kind of do. You make the adder, then you use the adder in a calculator.
Yeah, I think the language guide doing adder
Yeah.
makes sense. It's just like a simple component. It just happens to be associated with the tutorial.
Or could we put this all under tutorial? Like, sorry, if we have tutorial as the sort of like, section 10, and maybe we should break that up into, or pull that out into a top level section. But if we have tutorial and then HTTP and then per language guides, does that make sense?
I'd personally rather not rewrite how to do the calculator or write how to do the calculator tutorial language by language. I'd rather have them use their knowledge of the adder component to then build a calculator component to then compose them. The only
That's
like
the
it
only
wasn't
about HTTP.
until a month ago that the language guides had anything to do with the tutorial for reference. Before that, the language guides were building an add component that was a completely different width than the adder one. It was very confusing. But the idea there was like, let's just build a simple component and learn how to compose or learn how to, yeah. And then the tutorial has always been very hands off, which I think was something Mikhail like mentioned of how it doesn't really guide you. But the reason for that was just to not maintain code essentially. So we would need to just decide like how to change these, but I agree that they need restructuring to probably be a little bit more helpful or to be much more helpful for people. So that's another issue.
What do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about tutorial? And then under that, there is calculator, which does not have language subguides or per language sort of guides. And then a sibling to that, or like the next thing, is HTTP, which does have language subguides.
Okay. Yeah, and ideally we could use like those tabs where it could just be one page and you could toggle, but
You mean like the summary, like detail summary, sort of like HTML feature thing?
I'm not sure.
Okay, never mind then. Never mind. It's okay.
Essentially this, I want to write or preview, I want Rust or I want JavaScript.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, that like the code block tab things. Oh yeah, that could definitely work. Yeah.
I think I'm gonna drop and head to the component model implementation meeting.
Yeah, I think we should call it.
The same.
Okay, well, this was good. We made a lot of progress. I'll push up the meeting notes and the recording and see you in a couple weeks.
See ya.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.